The sun burned hot over the alien city of Krellis. Its streets were dusty, its buildings tall and crooked. Aliens of all kinds walked the market, traders, warriors, thieves, and beggars. In the middle of it all, an old human man pushed a rusty cart filled with water bottles. His back was bent, his steps slow, and his clothes torn and faded. His name was Joro, and most thought he was just a weak old vendor. Some aliens laughed as he passed. "Hey, old man, did you forget where your legs?" "Ah?" One shouted. Another threw a stone that bounced off his cart, making the bottles rattle. Joro didn't say a word. He just kept walking, eyes forward, silent as the wind. He had no friends, no family, no home, just his cart in the market. They called him useless, a joke, a broken human with nothing left. But sometimes, when no one was watching, he moved fast, too fast for his age. And when someone once tried to steal his cart, Joro twisted the thief's arm so quickly, it snapped. The thief screamed, and Joro simply said, "Don't touch what's not yours." The market went silent that day, but by the next morning, they laughed at him again, because no one believed he could be anything dangerous, not someone like him. Too old, too poor, too quiet. One day, a small alien girl named Yella tugged at Joro's sleeve. Her eyes were big and purple, her voice soft. "Were you ever someone important?" Joro paused, looked down at her, and gave a small smile. "Long ago," he said, and handed her a cold water bottle for free. She smiled back, but her older brother pulled her away. "Don't talk to that trash, he's nothing but a vendor," he snapped. The moment passed, but the air felt strange that day. Thunder rolled even though the skies were clear. Joro looked up, his face calm, but his eyes were sharp, not the eyes of a weak man, but of someone who had seen too much. Just then, a loud explosion shook the city. Smoke rose in the distance, and the market fell into panic. Aliens screamed, running in every direction. Traders grabbed their goods, children cried, and guards shouted useless orders. But Joro didn't run. He didn't even move. He stood still, watching the smoke, his hands gripping the cart tightly. He whispered something under his breath, words no one understood. It sounded like code, like a call sign from an old war. A tall alien mercenary across the market noticed him. His eyes narrowed, and his body stiffened. He watched as Joro slowly pushed his cart out of danger, not in fear, but in purpose. It was like he knew where to go, like he had done this before. The mercenary frowned, reaching for his scanner. He aimed it at Joro, scanning for any ID or record. Nothing came up, just the name Joro. And a tag, vendor, human, non-threat. But something didn't feel right. No normal vendor reacts to explosions with steady hands and cold eyes. The mercenary followed, keeping his distance. He watched Joro take a turn down an alley where no cameras watched, and when he reached the corner to follow, Joro was gone. Just the sound of dripping water remained. The mercenary looked up and saw an old pipe leaking above. Then he noticed something else, a strange mark carved into the wall, a symbol in human military code, long forgotten by most aliens, but not by him, because he once fought humans in the Battle of Terran Ridge and barely lived. Back in the market, Yella stood holding the bottle of water Joro gave her. She looked at the direction he had vanished, her little heart pounding. Something about him wasn't right, but not in a scary way. He felt powerful, like a secret waiting to be discovered. The laughter of the aliens returned slowly, but softer this time. Something had changed, even if they didn't see it yet. Far above the market, a satellite rotated silently. Its sensors picked up the explosion, the panic, and the slow movements of one old man. A voice on the other end of the feed whispered, "He's still alive." The feed cut off and darkness returned to space. But on the ground, the game had already begun. And the old water vendor was no longer just a vendor. The market returned to normal the next day. But something in the air had changed. The aliens still laughed, still pointed, still mocked the old human pushing his water cart. But their laughs felt a little more forced, a little more unsure. Joro didn't speak. Didn't flinch, didn't slow down. His face stayed calm, but his eyes watched everything. He saw who watched him, who followed, who looked twice. And he remembered faces late in the afternoon. A small boy ran past him and bumped into the cart. One of the bags hanging from it tore slightly, spilling some water bottles on the ground. Joro bent to pick them up, moving carefully, but as he reached for the last bottle, something slipped from the torn bag, a black object. Worn and dusty, it landed near a group of alien children who grabbed it with curious hands. "What is this?" one of them asked, holding it up. It was a black tactical mask, strange in design, human military tech from a time most had forgotten. Joro's face turned cold the moment he saw it. He snatched it gently from the child's hands, eyes narrowing just slightly. Then his face relaxed again, and he gave a small smile. "Old junk," he said simply, tucking it back into the bag. But someone had seen the way he looked at it, someone who understood what that mask really was. The tall alien mercenary from yesterday stood near a fruit stall, staring at Joro with suspicion. He had fought humans before, and that kind of mask was not worn by any civilian. That night, Joro walked through the empty alleys alone. The streets were quiet, the neon lights buzzing above. He passed by closed shops and flickering signs, then stopped suddenly. He turned his head just slightly and said, "You've followed me long enough." No one answered, but he didn't need a reply. He stepped into the shadow of a wall, his voice calm. "You walk like a soldier, not a thief." From the darkness behind him, the mercenary appeared, holding a plasma blade. "You're not just a vendor," he said, blade humming in the night air. Joro didn't answer, didn't move, didn't blink. "Who are you?" the mercenary asked, stepping forward slowly. "I sell water," Joro replied, voice dry as dust. The mercenary lunged with the blade, fast and silent. But Joro was faster. In one motion, he stepped aside, grabbed the mercenary's wrist, twisted, and disarmed him. The blade clattered to the ground, and the mercenary was slammed against the wall. Joro didn't hurt him, but held him firmly. "Why are you following me?" he asked softly. "There's a bounty on a human who survived Terran Ridge," the mercenary growled. "They say he's here, hiding in this district. And you think that's me?" Joro said, voice quiet. The mercenary nodded. "Your face. I've seen it in old reports." Joro let go, and the mercenary dropped to the ground, rubbing his wrist. "I'm not him," Joro said calmly. "I'm just a tired man trying to sell clean water." But his eyes said otherwise. The mercenary picked up his blade and looked at him carefully. "You're dangerous," he whispered. "You hide it well." Joro gave a small nod. "That's the idea." Back in his small home, Joro sat alone, the mask in his hands. He stared at it for a long time, the old rubber straps worn out, the inside still carrying the smell of war. He closed his eyes and remembered the screams, the fire, the silence that came after. He whispered an old name to himself, one no one had used in years. Not Joro, the name they gave him when he led Echo 9, a team no one believed had survived, above the city. Another signal was sent from a hidden satellite, coordinates locked, face confirmed. A cold voice on the other end said, "He's active again," and the screen faded to black, down below. Joro placed the mask into a hidden box under the floor. He sat back down, listening to the night sounds. The wind howled outside, but his heart was still, because he knew the storm was coming, and this time he would not run. The next morning began like any other, with merchants shouting prices and aliens moving through the dusty market. But the air around Joro felt heavier, tighter, like something unseen pressed against his skin. He pushed his water cart slowly, nodding to a few familiar faces. No one noticed the slight bruise on his arm, or the new scrape on his knuckles. No one asked why the old vendor's eyes looked sharper today, more alert. But someone was watching. The mercenary from the night before stood high above on a broken rooftop. His hands were steady, but his mind was racing. He had reported the encounter, as required, but no answer came back. He didn't know if that was a warning or a test. All he knew was that the bounty was real, and that the man below was not what he seemed. He had heard whispers of Echo 9, a ghost unit that vanished years ago after killing dozens of high-value alien targets. No one believed they still lived. He stepped back from the edge, pulled out his communicator, and pressed a red button. "Mark confirmed," he said, voice flat, requesting backup. But before he could finish the message, a hand grabbed his collar from behind. He was yanked back and thrown to the ground. The device slipped from his hand and shattered against the rooftop. He rolled over, reached for his blade, but it was already gone. Joro stood over him, holding the plasma weapon with ease. "I told you," Joro said, voice low. "You walk like a soldier." The mercenary coughed, shocked. How did you find me?" "I didn't," Joro answered. "You made yourself easy to follow." The mercenary looked into his eyes and knew it then. He wasn't just old. He was trained. He wasn't just strong. He was deadly. Joro stepped back and tossed the blade beside him. "I don't want to kill you," he said. "But if you bring others, I will." The mercenary stayed silent as Joro turned and vanished down the stairs. He didn't understand why he was still alive. But something about Joro's tone made him believe one thing. This wasn't about survival anymore. This was about warning. Later that day, a stranger arrived in the market. She wore a clean cloak. Too clean for someone from that district. She moved with grace, eyes scanning quickly. She stopped near a vendor and asked, "Where is the human with the water cart?" The vendor pointed lazily. "Old Joro?" "Over there." The woman smiled and walked on, but her hand rested near her side, where a knife was hidden. Joro felt her before he saw her. Something about the air shifted again, like a sound just outside. Hearing, he turned as she approached, and for the first time in years, his breath caught. She had a small scar across her cheek, same as before, same as the war. He whispered her name, not loud, just enough for her to hear. She stopped, surprised. "You remember," she said softly. "I remember all of them," Joro replied, "especially the ones who disappeared." They walked in silence to the side alley, where no one would disturb them. She turned to face him. "They're hunting Echo 9. "I know," he said. "They started with me." "They'll come for the others," she added. "We can't run this time." "I wasn't planning to," Joro said, and his eyes narrowed. "But I need to know who gave the order." She pulled out a data chip, thin and black. "This will tell you everything." He took it, stared at it for a long moment, then tucked it into a hidden pocket. The woman stepped closer, voice softer now. "You haven't changed." "I've changed more than I wanted," Joro said, "but not enough to forget who I am." They stood like that for a few seconds, two shadows from the past, standing in a world that had already moved on then. She was gone, blending back into the crowd. Joro looked down at his hands, scarred and shaking slightly, old bones, old memories. But something inside him had awakened, not rage, not pride duty, far above. A satellite reactivated and zoomed in on the old human. The image showed a clear view of Joro's face. An alien voice whispered through a hidden channel. "Confirmed, it's him. Proceed." Another voice asked. The first voice waited a moment, then said, "No, not yet. Let's see what he does next." Back in the market, Joro wiped sweat from his brow and handed a bottle to a customer. He smiled gently, thanked them, and continued pushing his cart. But his eyes scanned everything, because now he knew he wasn't the only one awake. The game had changed. And someone had just taken the first real step, and when the next one came, Joro would be ready. A quiet buzz filled Joro's small room as a device hidden deep under the floor clicked alive. It hadn't made a sound in years, not since the war. Ended. Joro stood still, holding his breath, as the old radio box blinked red, then green. A voice came through the static, broken and faint, but real. "Echo 9. Report in," it said. Joro didn't move for a long moment. He sat beside the old device and stared at it like he was seeing a ghost. The voice repeated again, slightly clearer this time. "Echo 9, if you're alive." Say something. Joro slowly reached forward, fingers trembling not from fear, but from memory. He touched the cracked speaker and whispered. Still here, silence followed, the kind that pressed against the walls and made the air feel heavy. Then a quiet laugh came through, not happy, but tired. I knew it, the voice said. I knew you weren't dead. Joro closed his eyes, and faces rushed through his mind, his old team, his squad, his brothers and sisters in arms. They were all supposed to be gone, scattered, captured, or worse. But someone had made it. Someone had called him back, across the planet, in a prison ship orbiting a broken moon. A woman with one robotic eye smiled. She had been locked there for years, forgotten. The same voice Joro heard played through a speaker hidden in her cell wall. She stood and cracked her neck. So the old man's still breathing, she said. Time to move. She walked straight to the wall, pressed 3 fingers into a corner, and the stone opened like a door. Behind it was a secret passage, a leftover from a different time, another far away. A quiet tech ghost who lived in a scrapyard turned on his screen. He tapped in a command and all his monitors showed the same word, ECHO. He smiled weakly, then disappeared into the shadows. One by one, the old team began to stir from their hiding places, not because they wanted revenge, but because the signal was never meant to be ignored. If it was sent, it meant war was coming. Back in the city, Joro stared at a faded photo stuck behind the wall panel. It showed 6 humans in armor, smiling, bruised, alive. He was in the middle, younger, stronger. But with the same calm in his eyes, he ran a finger down the photo, stopping at each face, whispering their names. Kara, he said softly. Reed, Milo, Dax, Hana. He paused at the last face, his own, and then folded the photo in 2. He stood up and opened the old locker hidden beneath the floor. Inside was a black case, locked and sealed with a code he hadn't used in over a decade. He entered the digits slowly, as if each number pulled up another ghost. The case opened with a hiss, and inside was a compact weapon, simple, efficient, human-made. Beside it lay an old tactical vest, a folded gray scarf, and a medal with a blood-red edge. He didn't smile, he didn't sigh. He just took off his vendor's robe and began to change. Not into a soldier, into who he truly was. The air around him felt different as he tightened the straps across his chest, as if the city itself recognized him again. Later that night, near a secret spaceport outside the city walls, 2 shadows met in silence. One was short and broad, the other tall and silent. They didn't speak names. They didn't smile. They only passed a thin drive between them. On it was a list, names, faces, locations, every known member of Echo 9 who might still be alive. A voice from the shadows whispered, "Find them before he does, or we won't live long enough to regret it." Joro, now dressed in black under his robe, moved through the city like wind through leaves. He passed familiar streets, but his path was different now. He wasn't hiding anymore. He visited an old junkyard where he once helped a boy fix a radio. He left behind a small piece of metal with a symbol only one man would recognize. A message, a call, a silent fire being lit. As he walked back to his small home, he felt eyes on him. But this time, he didn't care. Let them watch, let them follow. If the enemy was searching, he'd give them something to fear again. And if his team was out there, they would feel it. The weight in the air, the tension in the wind. The quiet before something loud, the calm before a war. The sky above Krullis turned a strange color. Not from weather, but from tension. It was too quiet for a city that used to sing with noise, trade, and chaos. People moved faster, heads down, voices low. Something had shifted, and even those who didn't understand it could feel it. In the center of it all, Joro walked with his cart again. But today, he wasn't selling water. The bottles were filled, but not with liquid. Each one carefully sealed, light, and ready to explode if touched. The wrong way. Old tricks from an old life. Joro had stopped being the vendor the moment he opened that black case. Now he was the shadow that hunted shadows. And someone was about to learn the cost of waking a ghost. Near the central plaza, a group of strangers set up fake stalls. Their clothes were too clean, too stiff, and their smiles too sharp. They looked like traitors, but they didn't move like traitors. Joro noticed them the moment he turned the corner. He didn't stare, didn't react, just changed his path slightly. Behind him, the youngest of the group tapped his wrist and whispered, "Target." In sight, Joro passed an old wall, his fingers brushing the surface gently. He tapped twice, then once, then paused. A small blink of light responded from a hidden corner. A silent message: he wasn't alone in this zone. Someone had seen the same trap and marked it. Whoever it was, they knew the code. That meant someone from Echo 9 was close, maybe even watching. As he pushed the cart into the side street, a child ran past him, shouting for help. Joro stopped, turned slowly. From behind the stalls, the strangers moved, acting like they didn't care. But one of them pressed a switch under the fruit basket. The air shimmered as a hidden trip mine came alive. It was aimed right where Joro's cart would roll. He didn't flinch, didn't pause. Instead, he turned around and pushed the cart down a different path, but not before slipping one of the fake water bottles near the mine. As he disappeared into the alley, the explosion rocked the plaza. Panic spread like fire, but the blast didn't harm any civilians. It only destroyed the trap and exposed the ones who set it. Joro watched from a rooftop, crouched low. He could see their panic. "Here there comes breaking into chaos," one of them shouted. He knew. "He turned it back on us," another yelled. "Get the rest, now, before he vanishes again." But they were too slow, because while they searched the ground, Joro had already moved to the rooftops. Silent, steady, invisible, he jumped down 2 floors into a storage yard and opened a hidden hatch. Inside was a small comms device, old but working. He placed the drive from the woman in it and watched as names filled the screen. His team was still scattered, but not for long. He sent out a new signal, this time stronger. Louder, a call not to meet, but to act. It said one thing, and one thing only: "We are burned. Prepare for strike." In a different part of the city, a repair worker looked at her wrist screen and froze. Her eyes turned serious, and she dropped the fake tools. She pulled off her jacket to reveal the armor underneath. From across a desert, another man looked up from his fire and smiled. He threw water on the flames and began walking toward the city. The wolves had been scattered, but now they had set again. Back at the plaza, the strangers were being arrested by city guards. Someone had tipped them off. None of them could explain what had gone wrong. They claimed they were just traitors, but someone had found the fake crates with weapons inside. Someone had sent proof, with names and faces. And Joro watched from above as they were taken away, not with joy, but with a cold sense of balance. Later that night, Joro sat at a small table outside a closed cafe. He drank real water this time, letting it cool his throat. The stars above blinked like old memories, and somewhere out there, he knew others were already moving. He didn't smile, didn't speak. He just waited for the next step, because now they were coming for him directly, and he wouldn't be selling water when they did. Far beyond the skies of Krullis, a silent signal echoed across space like a forgotten song waking old soldiers. In a desert world with broken towers, a sniper opened one eye. He had been sleeping with his weapon beside him. Like always, the message blinked across his visor. 3 words glowing: Red Echo 9 active. He didn't say anything. He just stood up. Time to go back. In a swamp world filled with steam and mist, a woman moved through the trees like a ghost. Her arms were covered in burns, and her back carried a pack of tools and explosives. The same signal reached her hidden camp. She paused only for a second, stared at the sky, and then whispered, "About time." She packed her things, set the swamp on fire, and walked away without looking back. In a scrapyard orbiting a frozen moon, a man with metal fingers tapped into an old server. The signal came through with such power it fried the screen, but the message was clear enough. He grinned and pulled on a worn coat filled with wires, then vanished into the smoke of the scrapyard, leaving only one thing behind: a mark. The symbol of Echo 9 scratched into metal. The wolves were returning, back on Krullis. Joro stood in the shadows of a warehouse as a cold wind blew through the rusted beams. His eyes didn't blink, didn't wander. He had sent the call. Now he waited for the response. He knew they wouldn't send a message back. They would simply appear, just like the old days. He placed 4 fake water bottles across the roof, each one marked with invisible ink, a signal only his team would understand. If one of them spotted it, they would leave a reply in the second bottle. If no reply came by nightfall, he would assume they were dead. But someone was already watching him from the next building. She wore a gray scarf and a coat too large for her shoulders. She didn't blink as she aimed her small scope at Joro. She saw the way he moved, slow but sharp. She knew that walk, that balance, that quiet threat in every step. Then she looked at the bottle he left behind. Her eyes widened slightly, just for a second. She pulled out a marker and changed the symbol on the second bottle, then walked away without making a sound. Joro returned that evening, the city glowing gold under a weak sunset. He checked the bottles one by one. At the second one, he froze. The symbol had been changed, 3 slashes curved into a half circle. Only one person ever used that mark: Hana, the tech breaker, his closest fighter in the squad. He picked up the bottle and walked into the night. Down below the main road, under the old bridge, the air was damp and quiet. That's where he found her, sitting on an old crate, her hands tapping a code into a blinking cube. When she looked up, her face was tired, older, but her eyes still sharp like a blade. "Hey boss," she said, like no time had passed. "I thought you died," he said, voice low. "I did for a while," she replied, then smiled sadly. "But you pulled me back." They sat together in silence, the city noise above sounding distant. He passed her the data drive from earlier, the one that listed their squad's names and locations. She scanned it quickly and shook her head. 3 of us are close. 1 is deep in enemy space. "I need them all," Joro said. "If they're still breathing," she nodded. "I'll find them." Suddenly, a loud blast shook the metal under their feet. They stood at once, weapons drawn. Smoke rose near the eastern district, followed by screaming and flashing lights. Joro stared at it without blinking. "They're starting early," he muttered. Hana pulled up her scanner. "Too big for a distraction." "They want to flush us out," Joro replied. "But they don't know we're already out." He pulled on his gloves, checked his sidearm, and nodded. "Split and circle," he said. She vanished into the dark. And Joro moved toward the smoke, not like a vendor, not like a target, like a weapon. And every step he took made the ground remember who he was. In the sky above, drones flew silently, tracking movement, searching for someone. A voice from a control station whispered, "Target will show himself soon." But they were too late. He was already among them. The night air was sharp, filled with smoke and the scent of metal and dust. Buildings near the eastern district burned quietly, their orange glow reflecting in broken windows. People screamed and ran, thinking it was just another gang war, another attack from rival houses. But this wasn't random. This was a warning. Joro moved through the streets without fear. The same hands that once poured water now gripped a weapon wrapped in cloth. He passed guards and enemies alike, none fast enough to stop him. He moved like silence given shape. Above him, drones scanned the ground, but something in their systems kept glitching. They couldn't lock onto him, because Hana had already infected their network. In the command tower, a tall alien officer stood stiff, fists clenched behind his back. He stared at the surveillance feed showing only static. "He was just a vendor," someone whispered. "No," the officer said, voice filled with fear. "He was Echo 9. The room fell silent. Only the sound of distant alarms echoed through the halls. And then, without warning, the lights shut off outside. Echo 9 returned. They didn't march in formation. They came like ghosts, one through the sewers, one from the rooftops. One dropped from a hidden ship cloaked just above the tower, each. One had scars, but their eyes still burned. They met in the courtyard where enemy troops tried to surround them. But it was already too late. The first explosion came from below, shaking the ground. The second came from above, as the drone network fell from the sky like dying insects. In the chaos, Joro stepped forward, every line of his face calm. He didn't yell orders, he didn't make speeches, he just pointed, and the others moved. The old squad was back, and every motion was clean, sharp, perfect. The alien soldiers panicked, firing wildly. But they weren't fighting street thugs or rebels. They were fighting professionals who had trained for years, who had fought in black zones and never left survivors. One by one, the attackers fell, not knowing who hit them, and in the center of it all stood the old man they once mocked. Joro walked into the command tower while it still burned. He stepped over fallen guards and opened the sealed door to the control room. The officer inside raised a weapon, but his hands shook too much to aim. You were just a water seller, he stammered. Joro stepped closer, quiet as a shadow. You should have let me stay that way, he said, then took the weapon gently from the officer's hand and dropped it to the floor. I'm not here to kill you, Joro continued. I'm here to make sure you never touch another one of mine again. The officer collapsed to his knees, defeated without a fight, outside. The battle was already ending. Echo 9 didn't need hours, they needed minutes, and when the sun rose over Krellis, the war was over. People came out of hiding, looking at the destroyed drones, the burning towers, and at the figure walking calmly through the ashes. Joro pushed a new cart, this one filled with clean water again. He handed a bottle to a crying child, patted the head of an old alien who offered him a free fruit. No one laughed this time. No one dared. Word spread fast from merchant to guard, from child to elder. The old water vendor was not a joke, not a weak human. He was the one who saved the city, the one who destroyed an entire strike team with only 4 allies, the one they called deadliest in his squad, because he was, and he chose peace until peace refused him. Joro sat that night on a rooftop, watching the lights return to the city. Hana sat beside him, fiddling with an old transmitter. Think they'll come again? She asked. Joro nodded slowly. They always do, but we'll be ready, she said with a small smile. Joro didn't answer. He just handed her a bottle of water, cold and clear. They drank in silence as the stars blinked overhead. And somewhere deep in the dark corners of space, someone new read the reports and whispered with fear. They woke the vendor.